to my good friend, Dr. Chaffee, right? But it's really radical concepts. What I say, our biggest job in this world, even as keto carnivores, is to question everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Always.
I mean, I was lucky because I met Ivor Cummins at the beginning of my journey, and we talked about glycocalyx about 6-7 years ago. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. But it's not being argumentative, is it? It's to-ing and fro-ing with ideas until you think, oh, yeah, I get this. Or it doesn't make sense because of X, Y, Z. But anyway, we've got Anthony Chaffee in the room.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, good. How are you guys doing? Good to you, Rob.
Join us.
Nice to see you, Anthony.
Yeah,
Anthony, what time is it there with you?
it's 4 a.m.
So what a trooper, 4 a.m. Yeah. So I think a massive thank you.
I had a line until 6.
I know.
Yeah.
Huge thank you for coming on.
All good.
Massively appreciated. I know everyone is super excited. I think we've got how many people live currently, Steve?
600. Well, don't know that. Well, that's better. 667 now watching.
I think that's 2062, is it? I've got on this end, but there we are. Whatever. It's
Robert Kiltz, thank you so much for holding the fort.
I love you guys.
Looking forward to getting you back on the Sunday lives as well. So we'll make it happen.
I think in Wyoming coming up. Are you going to Orlando?
Yeah.
I'll see you there first.
No, I'll be in San Diego and then Wyoming.
Okay, then I'll see you in Wyoming. I won't see you in San Diego.
Yeah.
But I'll see you guys live. It's really a pleasure.
Sounds
Thank you very, very much for letting me share my crazy concepts. God bless you guys.
Well appreciated. Take care, man.
Take care.
Soon. Cheers.
Bye, man. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah. Right. Dr. Chaffee.
Definitely.
I don't think we need an introduction, but it's nice to see you.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good to see you both.
Super early in the morning for you. I know your schedule changed, and I think many would have decided to opt out of a 3 or 3:30 a.m. wake up call to come on this. So thank you from Stephen and myself and everyone else who's listening. But nice to see you again. Welcome on board.
Yeah, good to see you guys too. Yeah, it's is what it is. It's not a big deal. So yeah, happy to be here. How's it going so far?
Fantastic. I think we're 4 hours 20 in. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, good start.
Yeah. And then 19 and a half hours to go. But yeah. So
it's been brilliant. Yeah, it's been good. We've some great questions. We got people lined up with questions for you, and a few people didn't read the description. And at 8 o'clock this morning, at 8 o'clock here, we're saying, "Where's Dr. Chaffee?" So we've told them a few times. We're due on later.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I probably should have had that in the description. I think I forgot to put that in. But yeah, it as soon as I signed this up, it went on StreamYard and then disappeared off of my computer. So I actually didn't have access to it again, and so I didn't actually know how to manipulate it or anything like that. So sorry about that. Sorry about any confusion.
No worries at all.
Well, that's my fault. I mean, if it's not easy, then that's my problem. So I do apologize.
It was something to do with StreamYard. It's just normally when I put things up on StreamYard, when I go into StreamYard, I can access it again, but I wasn't able to. That's why I had to get Richard to send me the link again, because it was like, it's not showing up on my StreamYard. I don't know what the hell's going on. So yeah,
crazy. All right.
Yeah.
No. Are you all right for some questions?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's have a look at this then. Health, body and mind. Hi, Dr. Chaffee. Could you please debunk these theories? It is said that fiber is needed to absorb toxins being eliminated in our gut. Then fiber is needed in women to eliminate estrogen.
To eliminate estrogen? I don't know. Well, I don't know how the fiber gets to the estrogen, but fiber. I mean, you don't absorb it, so it's not like getting in your bloodstream or anything like that. It's not getting to the ovaries, so I don't know what the argument is for the mechanism of how to produce estrogen. I've never heard that before, but it doesn't make sense like why it would, because it's it's external to our body, even though it's in our alimentary tract. That's technically outside of our body. Estrogen's inside our body. As far as the toxins are concerned, some people make the argument that will shed out some toxins in our bile, and then your fiber binds to bile and eliminates it. But just because it's in the bile doesn't mean that it's part of the bile salts and different sorts of emulsifiers that absorb fat, which is what the fiber binds to and then eliminates from the body. That is not a toxin. That is a necessary molecule. That's an essential molecule that we make at very great expense to our own body. And so we need that to absorb fat. And there's other things that come with the bile in that solution, like taurine. Taurine is it's considered a non-essential amino acid because we make it, but we make it in the liver, and then it goes out in the bile and then is reabsorbed in the gut along with fat. And so if you're eliminating out all your bile, you're also eliminating taurine. Taurine is not a toxin, and you can get very sick. You could even get extremely sick. You could die if you don't have enough taurine eventually. And so, no, I mean, that's a normal physiological process. If there are toxins that come out and need to be separate from the bile and taurine and things like that coming back in through the body, then there's already a mechanism for that. You don't need fiber to do that. You throw out the baby with the bathwater. You need bile, you need taurine, you need these sorts of things that your liver produces. That your liver's making that on purpose. It's not just to express toxins and then, oh my God, your body's just so stupid that it just reabsorbs these toxins. And if we aren't able to micromanage our own physiology, that everything's going to go to hell. So no, that's not going to happen. And which toxins? People always say it's like, oh, do a juice cleanse and this will detoxify you. How? Why? What? In what way? There are toxins in juice. There's sugar in juice. Those are toxins. And so, it's if people just throw around the word toxins as in a very general way, and without any sort of specific discussion as to what toxins and why this is an issue, it's sort of just a moot point. They haven't presented the argument clearly enough to actually demand a reply. But either way, we make bile on purpose and we reabsorb it on purpose because we're bringing in actual nutrients, not toxins. And the estrogen, I don't even know where that comes from, but no, that's insane. I have no idea why that would ever be an argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's my job to read the questions, and sometimes I think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But I think maybe it was something that someone, you'd spoken to someone online and heard.
Well, that's the thing is these people are talking to other people, and that those are the arguments they're getting back at them. Oh, you have to have fiber, or else you're not gonna have proper insulin in women. And like, what? But they just make these bold statements, and then people don't have any reason to say like, well, that's wrong. But the question is, okay, what's the evidence for that? What are you talking about? How does fiber get rid of estrogen? And you can ask very nicely. Maybe there's something going on. I just say, but okay, well, how does that work? How do you lose estrogen from fiber? And then at least you can look at that and then ask that question of people. Okay, well, people are saying that you disrupt your a woman's, and why is it a woman's estrogen? Men have estrogen too, just like women have testosterone. And so if fiber was going to alter the expression of estrogen in women, okay, would it be doing that in men as well? It's just a strange concept in general. But when you get challenged with these sorts of things, it's actually fair to ask, what the hell are you talking about? Why would that do that? What's the mechanism for that? And why is it that, there's only toxins in bile because there's all these essential things in bile that you have to have. So, just eliminating out bile, why is that necessarily a good thing on its face when there's all these beneficial parts to bile as well? So yeah, it's always fair to bounce the question back to them if it doesn't make sense.
Yes, I think you're right there. Because very often the question it's self-evident in the question. There's a bit of a lack of common sense, but that was not not being derogatory to the person who posted the question. I think it's where they've seen that information from. Yeah, where they've seen that information from.
Yeah. So they if they get that by someone, they can push back and just say, okay, well, how does fiber affect estrogen? And then maybe they have a reasonable response, but or sounding reasonable to that person, but at least you know where they're coming from, and so then they can bounce that to us and we can say, yeah, no, absolutely not. That doesn't make any sense. That's insane. So.
Right. Cool. YouTube user, what about Clabber? Well, Clabber, by the way, is something we don't really have in the UK, but just for those that might not know what it is, it's a sort of a fermented raw milk, a souring process at room temperature. You leave it at room temperature and it thickens. So can that help, Clabber, help with healing the guts? I eat just meat, but I would like to add Clabber from raw milk. Thanks. But any views on it?
Well, if we're talking about like fermented milk, like yogurts and kefir and things like that, Clabber's along the same line. I don't know. Some I'm hearing of Clabber, but if it's along those same lines, potentially there's some beneficial bacteria in there, and the way that you would eat that is if you'd put that or yogurt or whatever onto a piece of meat, you chew it up together and you try to chew it thoroughly and get this bacteria sort of mixed in as deep into that bolus of food as possible. Then you swallow that all together, and that hopefully acts like a little Trojan horse and protects some of the bacteria from the stomach acids and digestive enzymes and sort of sneak it through so it can get past that and down into your lower intestine. And potentially, if you've just scorched the earth with antibiotics, or you're starting out and you don't have necessarily a healthy microbiome, then reintroducing some of those healthy bacteria could be a good thing. I do see a lot of people on a carnivore diet that take before and after microbiome tests and they improve dramatically. And like Benazati, talks about his experience with that. He's been clean keto, very heavily meat based with just fruits and vegetables, non-carbohydrate ridden fruits and vegetables. And he checked his microbiome and it was fine, but it wasn't anything spectacular. And the recommendation was, eat less red meat, eat a lot more fruits and vegetables and fiber. And so he did the exact opposite of that. He ate no fruits and vegetables, no fiber, and only ate red meat. And in 3 months, his microbiome had improved dramatically, and 8 new species had actually shown up when they weren't detectable previously. He wasn't taking ferments. He wasn't taking fermented dairy or plants or anything like that. It was just the meat. Okay, so why did that change so much? Well, what you're eating, your microbiome is eating. And so that's going to cultivate a different microbiome. And where did those new species come from if he wasn't taking fermented foods? My theory is that it comes from your oral biome, which changes dramatically when you go on a carnivore diet. So you have very different bacteria in your mouth, depending on what you're eating, just like in your gut, because you're supporting different microbes. And especially when you get rid of carbohydrates, the carbohydrates are what feed the bacteria that cause cavities and excess acids and things like that. And so when you're cultivating a healthy oral biome, well, then just like that, putting that yogurt on or Clabber on meat and chewing it up to get those bacteria inside, just by chewing this in your mouth that has a lot of bacteria in it, but healthy bacteria, then that's going to get a lot of bacteria in those boluses of food. And then you're going to swallow that, and some of that's going to get through. So I think that's where you get those new microbes from. And so I don't think you necessarily need the fermented foods. But I don't think you, if you like it and you feel that it's beneficial to you, go for it. Some people do respond negatively to dairy. It can be pro-inflammatory, especially people with autoimmune issues. And so I would just caution them to, maybe avoid that. But, our oral biome, just like our microbiome, should be supported by our natural diet. If these things matter, and I think they do, then they should be supported by whatever we're eating that's natural for us. If we're just eating what we're biologically designed to eat, we should have the microbiome and oral biome that we're biologically adapted to have. And so, all animals in the wild, they don't get rotten teeth, they don't get cavities when they're eating their natural diet. Same with zoo animals and domesticated pets. They're very healthy. Don't see a bunch of dentists out there, scrubbing hippopotamus teeth and things like that. It's just their bodies take care of themselves. And in nature, if you lose your teeth, you lose your life. This is how it is. If you can't eat, if you can't use your teeth are so useful in the wild. They're used for defense, they're used for attack, they're used for hunting, they're used for eating. And so you lose our teeth, you lose your life. And so why are we accepting that our teeth just go rotten and fall out and have cavities and have to be micromanaged, disinfect it constantly because it's just this cesspool of disease and bacteria? Like, there's supposed to be bacteria there. It's just supposed to be the right bacteria. And if there's the right bacteria in your mouth, I think you're going to get the right bacteria in your gut. And I'm planning to, you look at the Inuit. The Inuit have found to have very healthy microbiomes. And I've seen experts on the microbiome. I'm trying to get some of these people on my podcast, but they were saying that they actually really like the carnivore diet because it gives an extremely healthy and diverse microbiome. And so that's their study of interest, their area of interest, and they think that so they're like, that's also another thing that's interesting about carnivore. So many people come from different directions. I came from a plants being toxic direction. They're coming from this makes the microbiome very good direction. Dr. Sean O'Mara came from this is the best way to get rid of visceral fat direction. Laszlo Borak, Professor Borak from UCLA Medical School, and Dr. Gabor Somlai, they came to carnivore because they're like, well, this is the best way to keep your deuterium levels down. It's really interesting, but all roads lead to Rome. And from all these different directions, finding that eating this way, eating in a species-specific, biologically appropriate manner, just seems to make everything better from all these different directions, which would stand to reason if this actually is indeed our biologically appropriate and most preferable diet.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm not a big lover of. Yeah, sorry, for me to jump in quickly, or
I was going to say, if you could read the next 3 or 4 questions, because the first one in particular, I think you and Anthony could have quite a backwards and forwards about it. But
okay, let me just jump in on this one really quickly. I'm not a lover of fermented foods in general, unless, as you say, you're coming from a damaged microbiome. Someone transitioning into the lifestyle may confer that benefit, especially as you say if they've been taking antibiotics. But I think from reading the question when he was on the screen originally, I think that person was already eating meat. I don't see any benefit to adding that compound back in because, as you say, it's going to contain casein, which could lead to intestinal permeability. Ben Azadi, the thing that you mentioned, I had it. He came on my show recently. So that's available on YouTube. And we went through his data, and the alpha diversity in his gut, as you say, improved. And he paid an awful lot of money for those tests. And it was just proof positive that living this lifestyle allows us to gravitate into a healthier and more diverse gut microbiome. The shift from Firmicutes over to Bacteroidetes, which is more preferenced, it's achieved through the foods that we eat. Our gut is the environment that we put it in, isn't it? If we eat healthy food, we become healthier. Adding in like fermented foods and other compounds, you can alter the gut microbiome as long as you continue to add that compound. But I don't think we should. I don't think we need to. And again, we fermented that food to get rid of all of those plant toxins that we don't want in the first place. So just eat your meat. I mean, personally, I would put it back in. If you're thriving without it, I think it could be a tool to implement along the journey. But if you're already carnivore, I see no benefit to putting that back in other than variety. Now, the caveat to that would be that the gut microbiome would be already healed and the casein wouldn't be causing as much damage. But still, if you're living a carnivore lifestyle, I don't see any reason why you'd want to put it back in. Would you like me to read this one?
Well, just one little quick thing on that. If as Richard said, like if you're thriving and you feel great and everything's perfect, what is there a problem? And so you check your microbiome and it's just like, oh, it could be tweaked in these sorts of ways, but you feel amazing and there's no issues. Could you feel better? I guess potentially, but how much of an effect does the microbiome have on our health? And how much of this is an association with what we're eating? Because your microbiome is going to change with what you eat. I mean, daily it can do that, if you just change up what you eat every day. And so, are all these bacteria directly influential on our health, or are some of them just associative, that this is just like, well, we see this pattern when people are just healthy in general, and you can just be healthy because you're eating a healthy diet? And how much of that is an influence of that bacteria can actually, change the expression of these genes and these, chemicals and serotonin and all these other sorts of things. So I think there's going to be a combination of that. But at the end of the day, if you feel great and you don't think there's something to improve, then whatever, and you can always try, you sort of add something back in, say, okay, well, I'm going to get these bacteria back in, and, you feel better or worse for having the clabber in there. And then you don't have to keep doing it. Once you have an established microbiome, once you have those bacteria in your gut, they'll perpetuate based on the food that you're eating. So you don't need to have these for the rest of your life necessarily, unless they're not being supported on the food that you're eating. And if they're not being supported on the food that you're eating, and you're eating, an ancestrally appropriate, biologically appropriate diet, they're probably not biologically appropriate and ancestral. It's probably not ones that you need. And so, that's the idea of prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are the food that feed the bacteria, and the probiotics are the bacteria themselves. So the meat that you're eating is the prebiotic. So that's going to feed all the bacteria that are supposed to be there. Maybe there's some species of bacteria that are supposed to be there but aren't getting there. I think they'll probably get there from your oral biome. But let's say you introduce those through fermented foods from whatever source, and that gets reintroduced into your gut. Well, once they're there and you have this thriving colony that's living off of the things that you're eating, you're good, you're done. You don't need to keep doing that. And so, you could do some self experiments and add some in, but like Richard said, I don't think you need it. And once you're established and once you're doing well with it and you feel good, I don't think you necessarily need to add something in like that. And dairy can be problematic for a lot of people. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, spot on.
Fire away, Rich.
So, hi, Dr. I can't read and speak at the same time, but I'll give this my best shot. Steve, you are way better at presenting. Hi, Dr. Chaffee. I remember hearing you say that when building muscle, it matters what you ate that day before rather than what you eat after the workout. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, I think what they're referring to is that a lot of athletes and people will say, well, I have to eat this, big meal. I have to eat a big breakfast. I have to eat a big something before I work out to give me energy. Or the night before, I have to eat a big meal to have energy for the next day. And I always thought that as well. And so the point that I was making is that actually your fat stores are what you're going to be running on, and that was something that you've laid down weeks ago. So the way I've sort of termed it is the energy that you're using to play the game, play the match, do your training session today didn't come from the food that you ate yesterday. It came from food that you ate 2 weeks ago, right? So because you have these fat stores, this is something that I know that you've spoken on a lot, and Dr. Paul Mason, Professor Peter Bruckner, and Professor Tim Noakes, have all spoken about. But one of the things to think about is that even for like a very lean, high performance athlete at 65 kilos who weighs 65 kilos and has 6% body fat, just 6% body, that's very lean. They have 150,000 kilocalories of energy in their fat deposits in their body. You're never going to run out of that, not on a game day. So, you don't have to eat 2,000 calories and carb load and all that sort of stuff, because all you're doing is jacking up your insulin and locking off that 150,000 or more. I mean, most of us aren't 6% body fat. You're a high performance athlete, yeah, you could be. But just normal people walking around probably aren't. And so probably have more than that. And so it's, you eat the carbohydrates, you raise your insulin, and now you lock off that energy, and that's not available anymore. Now you have to keep eating carbs and things like that. So that's what I was talking about there, is that, so people say, well, I have to eat on the day of a game. And it's just like, You don't actually. And I've spoken to athletes and professional athletes, and they're a bit worried. Well, what if I have like an 8 p.m. game? What should I eat? I was like, well, look at it this way. I mean, you have plenty of energy available, but if you want to eat, I would give it I would eat a smaller meal. I wouldn't fill up, and I would eat at least 5 hours before game time. It's interesting that Michael Jordan didn't follow carnivore, but he had a lot of coaches and trainers and doctors and things like that worked with him, checked his numbers, checked his performance output and things like that. And what they found was like the best diet for him on game day was a carnivore diet, and he would eat a steak 5 hours before his game, and that was what they found was his best sort of food to eat on the day of the game. And so, but at the same time, if he was in a ketogenic state, wouldn't even need that, but he probably was starting to sort of slip into ketosis depending on what he ate the day before, because now 24 hours fasted at that point, or fasted from carbs anyway. And so that's what I meant by that. It's just that you have ample fat supply on your body, and you don't have to get all worked up on like, I have to eat now because I'm going to work out tomorrow. I did that as well on carnivore, and my body was telling me, don't eat. This is stupid. We have plenty of energy. And I was very, very freaked out by that. And the next day I felt amazing, and I had perfect energy, and I was like, obviously. And so then that sort of clicked into me. So yeah, but then, you do want to eat enough overall. If you're working out and you're lifting weights, you don't want to build muscle, then you do need to give yourself an adequate amount of food. But I still think that it's going to be dictated by your hunger signals, and you're giving inputs to your body, and you're trying to build muscle, and your body's going to tell you how much it needs to build that muscle. It's, you don't need to micromanage these things. And if you're force feeding yourself and you're eating past the point of satiety and meat tasting good, then the majority of that's just going to go into your fat stores. It's not going to just force your body to make extra muscle. Like some people say, you have to be in a caloric surplus to force your body to make muscles, because it just is so stupid. It doesn't know how to make muscle on its own. Now, if it's a caloric surplus, then by definition, it's surplus to demand, and it's going to go in your fat. And so it's not going to build extra muscle. It's going to build extra fat, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, spot on. And interestingly, that 150,000 kilojoules is roughly 10 times more than your counterpart at 6% body fat can store in glycogen.
Oh, yeah.
But just to give you some reference, I'm not a professional athlete anymore, at least anyway, but I've recently gravitated from bodybuilding into triathlon, running and cycling. I run half marathons, 16 hours minimum fasted. And fairly quickly for someone who's pretty new to running, I achieved a 1 hour 26 half marathon a few weeks ago, completely fasted. So no carb required and no fat the morning of that meal. More interestingly, since then, a good friend of mine, Mikey Davis, who was once ranked in the top 50 in the UK as an Ironman athlete, he competed. He was vegan at the time, and I'm sure you've heard me mention him a couple of times. I've been working with him for 2 years, and he, 2 weeks ago, or was it last week, competed in the European Championships in a 70.3, which is half an Ironman. He completed that in just over 4 hours. And he won. He's number one in Europe now as a carnivore. He did that fasted. So that's 4 hours of high intense. So, I mean, I'm half Ironman, a full Ironman, I think, is a 2.4 mile swim. So I'm guessing it was a 1.2 mile swim. Then it's followed by a 112 mile bike ride. So I'm guessing that's going to be like a 56 mile bike ride at intense, in high intensity also. Followed by a half marathon, which he ran, I think, in like 1 hour 20 something. So he ran a 1 hour 20 half after doing those things, completely fasted and living a carnivore lifestyle. So no, you do not need to eat on game day. Most certainly not. In fact, if I do, I find it hinders my performance.
Big time. I've always, I figured that out just naturally, just how my body felt. I never ate on game day. And I always told people, I always play hungry. You always want to have that sort of that bit of an edge. I always sort of thought of it as our hunter ancestors that were out. You get up and you just have that bit of things. Okay, I gotta go fight something. I've got to go kill something to survive today. And you have that bit of an edge, and then you eat something, your body just goes, right, well, you've done it. Everything's fine now. And you sort of lose that sort of that edge that your body gives you in order to get up and go fight something, go kill something, and eat it and supply food for your family. And so I always felt that I had a bit of an edge. I had better energy. In fact, I often would forego dinner the night before. I would just actually feel better. And especially if it was later on at night, I wouldn't eat. And I wouldn't eat like right before bed, which normally I wouldn't care whether I did or not. But on the day before games, I was the opposite. Everyone else is carb loading and eat a whole bunch of pasta, and I was doing the opposite. I was avoiding food, and then the next day I would not eat any food, and then I always felt better for having done that. I would just drink water, just drink a bunch of water, and I wouldn't even take a bunch of energy drinks and things like that before that. It was just water really, and I just felt always felt the best when I did that.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective. If we are in a hunger state, ketones are elevated, we become more focused, and we have higher energy on demand. This makes perfect from an evolutionary perspective to be ready to hunt and kill our prey, I guess, So, and we can translate that into game day. So, yeah, no need to eat before a game. And as you rightly say, I mean, maybe not even the day before.
Yeah, there's a book out at the moment called The Telomere Effect. And they actually try to reframe stress in that way as a positive challenge, and they look at the things that we're led to believe are negative and actually saying, like fasting, has a positive challenge and definitely has an effect at a molecular level. Anyway, right, let's get to the next question. By the way, if anyone's noticed, I'm a bit hoarse. England last night got through to the semi-final of the Euros 2020. And I'm one of those stupid men that shouts at the television when he's watching the sports. But they won. Anyway, went to penalties, as always with England. Anyway, right, here we go. How do those bacteria in fermented foods like kimchi and yogurt manage to survive the stomach's acid?
Yeah, they probably don't in a lot of cases. But, you could argue that if you're eating it with a bolus of food and it's not fully digested, or that all the stomach acid gotten in, because it doesn't necessarily liquefy in your stomach. That's further on down the digestive process. So if there's bacteria sort of stuffed in the middle of this bolus of food and it's chewed up thoroughly, and it's with meat and other sorts of things, and it'd probably be okay. That's the idea anyway, is that you're going to sneak some of these bacteria through. But if they hit the stomach acid, no, they'll most of them will die. Some of them won't, some of them do okay, but a lot of them will. And so, if you're eating like, fibrous sort of plant kimchi and things like that, and that the fiber itself actually blocks out the digestive enzymes and can block out and protect the bacteria and other sorts of things. Which is, I guess, if you're eating that in that context, may be helpful to get this bacteria through, but in general, it's not very helpful because it blocks out, the digestive enzymes from the food that you want to break down and digest, and then can actually get in the way and be a physical barrier between broken down food and the lumen of your intestine. And so it doesn't get absorbed or as absorbed as well. And so, people such as Dr. Robert Lustig stress that fiber can actually reduce the absorption of various nutrients by up to 30%. And so he's talking about this in the context of, well, that's good if you're eating garbage and you're eating a bunch of fructose and sugar and carbs, because it prevents 30% of that absorption. But, you're getting 70% of those fructose, sugar, and carbs. And so, is that a net benefit? Probably not. But, in that case, it's, I guess, better than nothing, but it also stops you and prevents you from absorbing 30% of healthy things like meat and B12 and all these other sorts of things. So I don't think that's a great idea overall. But that's the idea, is that it's some of the bacteria will be stuffed down in the middle of this chunk of food and doesn't necessarily get exposed to the stomach acid. But there's people that argue that doesn't protect it, but I think one way or the other, and I think it has to get through somehow, because why else would these new strains of bacteria show up in our gut, and when they weren't there before, unless they were just in such small numbers that they just were undetectable. But you can detect really really small amounts of these things because you culture them and look at them in that way. But that's the argument anyway of how you would sneak these things through, sort of like a Trojan horse.
I get that. This is a very concisely worded statement come question. A benign tumor, no cancer, only ferments glucose? Question.
No, I don't think it necessarily only just ferments glucose. Could still ferment glutamine. It depends on the tumor. But you know, I you know, because the thing is that I don't know that all of these benign tumors, because there are a lot of them, have been looked at from what sort of energy source are they making energy from? You know, where they glucose, glutamine, other sorts of substrates. You know, cancer is that is when the theory goes, the metabolic theory of cancer, mitochondrial theory of cancer, is that when the mitochondria get so damaged and so disrupted in their functionality that they can't actually carry out their normal processes of oxidative phosphorylation. They also can't carry out their required functions of stopping cell proliferation and killing the cell, apoptosing the cell when it's too damaged, and so they don't have that ability. So benign tumors, you know, I mean, there are benign tumors that are precancerous and ones that are not precancerous, and so, you know, what do their mitochondria look like, and why do they have this expression to grow more than other cells? It's a good question. Not all are going to act the same. Not all are going to have the same reason behind them. I don't think, but also I don't know. I have looked into other sorts of benign tumors that are relevant to my field in neurosurgery, which are meningiomas, which are usually benign, but, you know, sometimes it can be very aggressive and invasive. You know, like a stage grade 3 meningioma is sort of considered malignant and can spread around the central nervous system and be very invasive and aggressive. And so, leading up to that, you know, I guess you could sort of think of these as sort of precancerous benign tumors that are just growing, I mean, because they're growing in the brain or in the spinal column, or around, you know, the sac around the brain, the dura that goes around the brain. That's where they're growing out of, and they're sort of pushing into the brain, or the spinal cord. Then they can cause very serious issues that can kill you. And there are studies looking at ketogenic diets and improving outcomes and shrinking these things down. They're very preliminary. There aren't many, but that is a question that people have asked, and so at least limiting glucose in that context of being in ketosis does seem to help with that benign tumor as well. And I've actually seen patients that had inoperable meningiomas that had went onto a ketogenic carnivore diet and actually shrunk it back. There was one lady, it was sort of a base of the skull, very difficult to access the base of the skull, just any part of the skull. Skull's meant there to be protecting the brain, so it's very hard to get into. And there's certain parts that are very hard to get into. And so like the base of the skull sort of, you know, sort of here's the floor, the sort of seats, you know, down there, and it goes down a bit from here. But there's a sort of the base is there. You have to sort of get in underneath this thing. There's all these really, really important structures, all your cranial nerves and vessels and things like that you're trying not to destroy and kill somebody and or permanently debilitate them. And so she had one deep down in there and is actually growing into her optic nerve, and it wasn't operable, certainly not the part that went into her optic nerve. And so she was starting to lose her vision, and she couldn't take this thing down. And so she just went on a ketogenic carnivore diet, and all of a sudden it actually started receding out, and actually her vision returned as well. So that's one patient, but it is a demonstration of what we're seeing, at least in these preliminary studies as well. But then a lot of other benign lesions, you know, polyps in the rectum, in the colon, for instance, or skin tags, which are basically polyps on your skin. You know, these have been shown to be very influenced by insulin, and you have high insulin resistance, and you can actually have an overgrowth and expression of these benign tumors, and sometimes they're precancerous tumors, especially the ones in the colon. and then they largely go away. Is that because of the glucose and glutamine that you're interrupting, or is that because you're lowering down insulin and you've eliminated this growth hormone that's this anabolic hormone that's telling different tissues to grow inappropriately. So there's going to be a combination of these sorts of things, but I still think that it's a good idea to be in a ketogenic state regardless. And a lot of these benign tumors seem to resolve. Not all of them do. And so there's going to be a different mechanism going on in those ones.
Cheers, Anthony. I've got a big question here, which is in two parts. Hi, Dr. Chaffee. Part 1, diagnosed pituitary prolactinoma 5 years ago. Wrecked me. Taking carbogen now, when diagnosed, T was 5.1 over 1.47 and prolactin was 6,500. Last July, T was 15.3 stroke 441, sorry.
Nice.
Carnivore and gym since January the 1st. Bloods in March. T now 22.5 stroke 645, prolactin 372. Thoughts on carnivore helping with the tumor, please? Taking 8-stem Enhance Ultra a day with plasma flow and Sciatica.
Well, it just sort of ties into the previous discussion on cancer and precancerous lesions or even benign lesions. Why are they growing? Why are the precancerous ones or the benign ones? Why are they growing? Is this to do with the mitochondria? Is that these adenomas? Some of these things can be malignant. Some of these things can be very nasty. Some of them can be some of the different growths that you get, I should say, in the brain. They can be very aggressive and nasty, and others that they're not necessarily. But because they're in this very small, cell tursicas, this very tiny little bony compartment where the pituitary and part of the hypothalamus come down into, there's no room. So this just growing a little bit just smashes that down. So there does seem to, with different adenomas, there does seem to be an effect that, ketogenic metabolic therapy, has on these things to sort of shrink these down. And, why do our bodies go wrong in the first place? There's so many mechanisms and so many things to learn and understand, but a lot of these things come down to the fact that we're putting in chemicals that don't belong in our body, in our body that don't belong in our body. And we're getting weird, strange expressions, and we're getting hormonal disruptions. We're getting things to grow that aren't supposed to grow and impact other things that are going to have a negative outcome. So I can't say for sure that just doing ketogenic diets or carnivore diets are going to help people's pituitary adenomas. Because I don't think I haven't looked into the data on ketogenic diets on pituitary adenomas. That's something to put on my list. Like the meningiomas, there probably is something, because there are thousands of studies on ketogenic diets and different issues and pathologies that go on in the body. But being on a ketogenic carnivore diet significantly helps testosterone. If this is something that's going to help shrink down your prolactinoma, then on top of the medications that you're using, or maybe even on its own, but I would not forego the medications, certainly not without better understanding of this. But it's going to shrink that, whatever is going on, it could potentially shrink that down and stop putting pressure on the pituitary that's going to screw up the rest of the hormones that are coming out of it. So that's an amazing recovery. You have this big prolactinoma. That's one of the pituitary tumors that we don't have to surgically resect unless they're, it's apoplexy and bleeding and all that sort of stuff. You just have to get in there and sort of clean up the scene. But you identify that, then you actually just treat this medically, and it'll keep that prolactin down, and that adenoma can shrink down just from the medication cabergoline. So that can potentially improve your testosterone and the expression of different hormones from your pituitary and hypothalamus on its own. And so, some of that recovery is just going to be from the medication shrinking this down, but you could potentially be further benefited by being in a applying ketogenic metabolic therapy principles to this adenoma and potentially shrinking that down even further, and allowing even less pressure on the pituitary, and then fixing other physiological processes that are going to improve your testosterone past that. So, those numbers are great. For UK and Australia numbers, 20 to 25 for total testosterone is what you would expect a healthy 25-year-old male to be. And that 600 to 900 would be the levels of free testosterone that you would expect a healthy 25-year-old male to be. And so you have perfect numbers. You have perfect youthful, optimal young adult numbers, which is great. So, it's just, it's a testimony to, whatever you're doing is doing well for your body. So keep it up.
Great stuff. We can get Richard back on this now because it's continuing the chat. While you're doing that, I just got to check on my dog. We're 5 hours into 24, Rich. So we've only got 19 to go. So,
I mean, don't sell yourself short. It's only 17 hours and 57 at this point. So, I mean, really, it's like no time at all, Yeah.
Right. So we've got continuing a short discussion in the chat. If one is working out fasted, can that person deplete glycogen store enough that the body will break down muscle?
Hard no. What would you say, Richard?
Yeah, spot on. Muscle's precious. Coming back to the point that Jonathan, Carnivore Muscle, mentioned earlier in regards to sarcoplasmic volume within the muscle. A lot of the volume we lose, it is volume. It's not actually muscle. When people come off carb, for example, and they think that they've lost muscle, it isn't. It's just volume. So, yeah, as Dr. Chaffee says, no. Even simple.
Okay. Well, I wish I could give you a longer answer, so I could go and look at my dog.
Well, I'll give you a longer answer as well. So Dr. Volek did a study. It was the FASTER trial that showed that people that had been keto adapted for over 5 months, and these were distance ultra marathoner sort of people. So they were putting out expending a lot of energy and things like that. They found that they had better output on a ketogenic diet. They had also similar levels of muscle glycogen. They did a series of 3 muscle biopsies, and they had similar muscle glycogen prior to working out. And then the keto adapted group had better muscle glycogen post workout. And it took actually, after 3 hours, then the carb group sucking down gels and things like that were able to sort of catch up and had similar levels, I think slightly higher, but I mean very slightly, than the keto adapted group. So your body actually has plenty of glycogen in your muscles and liver. You actually run on fat as well. Your muscles can run on fat, and you talk about fatty oxidation and various VO2 maxes and things like that. It used to be thought that you cannot. You have to have carbohydrates to run above 85% VO2 max. They actually showed absolutely not. It's just, is what Professor Noakes says. He thinks that glycogen is actually in the way, that we just sort of store excess glycogen to get it out of the bloodstream, so it's not being toxic excessive low levels of blood sugar in the body. And then you sort of use this stuff, you can get it out of the way so you can get to your preferred energy, which are ketones and fats. And then, so in these studies, I actually found that people had massive use of their ketones and fatty acids at very high VO2, but well above 85% VO2 max. And but yeah, so that you don't run out of glycogen. Tim Noakes did another set of experiments where they said, okay, well, different sorts of shorter sort of things, or even longer things, whatever. They were like, okay, well, maybe there's still glycogen in their system. So it's okay. Well, we're just gonna do a series of 800-meter hard runs, and those it's a lot of effort to run 800 meters as hard as you can. It's halfway between a sprint and just running hard, because it's high intensity. And so they just did like 6 of these things in a row, and it's just like you're gonna wear out any glycogen you had from eating a while ago. And so your body's going to have to run on fat. It's going to have to run on ketones. It's going to have to whatever, glycogen you're making, de novo at that time. And they found absolutely no problem, that they were performing at this extremely high level with, by burning out all the glycogen that has very high level of ketone use. And so you're going to make glycogen at least as fast, if not faster, than carb-fueled athletes sucking down gels. So first of all, it's not an issue, and second of all, it doesn't even seem to be the primary source for athletes, energy source for athletes anyway. It's actually sort of gets in the way. And so when you start in that ketogenic state and you have ketones and fatty acids available for use, then you're actually going to be better off. And no, you're not going to catabolize your muscles at any stage until you run out of fat. That's something that, it's a very strange one, but I've seen people make that argument. Oh, you have to eat carbs or else your first fuel source is going to be your muscle. And then when you run out of that, then you'll go to your fat. I mean, what a dumb statement. How do you ever lose fat then? How do you ever burn fat? And why would fat is our fuel source. I mean, that's our gas tank. I mean, that's just insane. That's like saying that your car engine is like, oh, it's not going to run on the gas from your gas tank. It's actually going to start burning your tires for heat. And then that's what it's going to use first. It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And so, no, that's a weird one that gets thrown out there, but it's has no actual basis in physiology. And, potentially just from that, like you're talking about, like the water weight and glycogen that's in muscles, and that sort of goes down. And so say, oh, muscle bulk's gone down. No, it didn't. It just, it's just not, it doesn't have the glycogen and water stuffed in it anymore, but the muscle tissue itself is whole and intact. That would be a really, really, really dumb way of making an animal, is that its muscles start breaking down before its fat stores, which are the energy source for all animals. The energy storage mechanism for all animals, that would obviously get used first. And so, like as Professor Ben Bickman shows, I mean, he's been studying insulin metabolism and that for 20 years now. He's a professor of biochemistry at BYU, and so he shows very clearly that the body does not touch the muscles for energy until all the fat stores are gone. And again, you've got 150,000 calories stored in your fat for a very lean athlete at 65 kilos, 6% body fat. You're not going to run out of your fat. You're just not going to, until you become so emaciated and starving. Then you're going to start cutting into your muscles. But it's a long ways away, and certainly not going to happen out of workouts.
Yeah, for sure. And just to add a little bit more to that, it's funny enough, molecular biochemistry is something I'm studying currently.
Nice.
Yeah, trying to get a bit better understanding. Try to get a little bit deeper into the weeds, as we say. But that mechanism that you mentioned in regards to the Volex study, I'm sure it was 12 weeks. I don't even think it was as long as 5 months. I may be wrong, because I know that there's a number of studies, but that's an interesting one. And it does highlight the fact that the lactate, and it is lactate and not lactic acid, because lactic acid doesn't really exist in the human body. Lactate is sent to the liver and is converted back into glycogen through gluconeogenesis. Lactate is one of the substrates that becomes pyruvate and then enters phospholynyl pyruvate, and basically does glycolysis almost in reverse, bar 3 different sequences. So it's almost the same mechanism in reverse as glycolysis, and it'll send the glycogen back to the muscle at a higher rate than, as you say, even a carbohydrate athlete. And I did a run last year where I wore a continuous blood glucose monitor. My blood glucose, I think, was like 3 point something, which is classed as being pretty low. Before the run, there was another guy there who was, he must have been type 2 diabetic, because he had one on. His was like in the 6s or something. At the end of this, and it was only a short run, it was 10K. At the end of the 10K run, mine was in double figures. So my blood glucose, and I don't eat any carbohydrate, I don't carb load before an event. My body made that glucose within that run, to 3 to 4 times the amount that I had prior. His had crashed, his tanked, so it just shows how flexible the body is when you're highly adapted. And I think that study being 12 weeks just reiterates the fact that you don't even need to live the lifestyle for prolonged periods of time, but there is an adaptation processing period involved with upregulating those systems. But the body's highly intuitive. It's very clever. And we make glucose. Glucose is essential. We can't live without it. But we make all of the glucose that we need. The requirement for an exogenous source of glucose is non-existent. We make all of the glucose that we need. Professor Noakes, when you mentioned about the muscle stores being a dumping ground, I think is how he referred to it, because glucose is a toxin. It's a poison to the body, and it does this to save our life as long as we have enough for the glutaminergic neurotransmitter synthesis in the brain. And this is why it is said that athletes will bonk in an event. It's not to do with muscle glycogen, it's to do with blood glucose. And as you rightly say, so it's incredible how adaptive the body is when we gravitate and get back to our natural metabolic state. As Dr. Robert Kiltz mentioned, this is our natural metabolic state. We are fat adapted. We've taught ourselves to become sugar adapted.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt a little bit of flow, but I do want to get all the questions that people have done super chats for. Carnivore, 8 months for autoimmune, have gained fat, lot cellulite. Now I'm assuming that's lost cellulite, not that you've got a lot of cellulite. Weight train for 5 times a week, eat 1 gram per pound of protein and fat. Fasting made it worse. So it might be the cellulite there. Lower my fat or increase my protein?
Have gained fat, lost cellulite, weight training, fasting made it worse. Lower my fat, increase protein. Not necessarily. I'm sort of trying to maybe, some of the sort of the truncated sort of sentences and things like that. Just trying to understand exactly what is being asked. But no, I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to, lower your fat, increase protein. I mean, you only have a certain amount of protein that you need. And, past that, and you have to start dipping into your protein to then use as an energy source, which is, less efficient and less optimal than just using fat. That's an essential nutrient anyway. I mean, you can sort of limit yourself. You can, limit how much you're eating, and you can, manipulate your body into losing, using more of your fat, and like if you're, but, I would only sort of do this in the context of like, Richard, you're prepping for a competition, like a bodybuilding competition or something like that. I don't think you need to do that in a normal physiological setting where you're just trying to gain health, because the thing is that it's not, you're going to suppress your metabolism. You're going to do other sorts of things to your body that aren't necessarily optimal. It's not like healthy to do that to yourself, and it doesn't set you up for, a long-term, gained a lot of cellulite. Okay. That's, it doesn't set you up for like a long-term, for long-term success where, you're changing things around, and then, you can starve yourself into a smaller dress size. Everyone knows that, we've seen concentration camps all around the world, but, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good thing, and that's a sustainable thing to do for your body. And at a certain point, you have to start eating again. And if your metabolism is completely crashed, then you're going to put on fat. Your body's going to want to put on fat and store this energy because it's going to try to protect you from the next famine. It is a bit weird that you've gained fat and you gained a lot of cellulite, because it's normally the exact opposite of what people say. Most people, when they just go to a ketogenic diet, and especially a ketogenic carnivore diet, they talk about how it just breaks up their cellulite and it goes away. And it seems to be a connection between insulin resistance and cellulite. And saying fasting made it worse. That's interesting that fasting, just not eating anything, would make your cellulite worse, make your fat worse. So I would wonder what else is going on. I don't think it's necessarily, reducing the amount of fat that you fasted, you didn't eat anything, and that seemed to make it worse. So I think there's something weird going on with your metabolism and your biochemistry and your hormones. And that I think probably the best thing to do is to keep going on a high fat carnivore diet and allow your body and your hormones to heal and your metabolism to heal. I have patients that will be slow to lose weight, or even gain weight when they start a carnivore diet. But you check their metabolism, the different sort of markers of their health and metabolism, they're all out of balance. I mean, they're just all out of whack. But then you check them 3 months later and they're better, and 3 months later and they're better, and they're better, and they're better. And eventually the body just says, okay, we're happy now. And the weight starts dropping off of them, and the fat starts dropping off of them. And so that's probably what's going on here. And you know, I mean, this is sort of something that might need a bigger like a proper consultation to, you know, start to figure out what the hell is going on here, and doing blood work and things like that. And then you can at least say, okay, well, look, all these different things are sort of stacked up in this way, you know, just give it time. But I would still expect it to be something that in time would normalize. And, you know, like you said, you know, you did this for an autoimmune issue, and that's the most important thing is helping your autoimmune issue. And so, you know, how is that? Is that helping? Is that better? Are you feeling otherwise? But it is a bit of a weird one. I would also wonder, you know, exactly what you're eating and what you aren't eating. Is it, you know, people say carnivore, and that can mean different things to different people, but especially for autoimmune issues, you know, just being on a pure red meat and water diet, like just only beef and lamb and only water, people seem to do the best for autoimmune issues, and they'll do best for other issues as well, metabolic issues and etc. when they're on that sort of diet as well. So I'd wonder if that's what you were doing. But no, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think too.
Well, I think one of the things about cellulite is you only get that in females because their collagen structure, you know, is more like a matrix rather than in a male. The collagen actually runs sort of like fiber by fiber, which is, so you get that aesthetics of cellulite doesn't tend to happen on males. So it could be something to do with collagen production as well, or lack of it, or actually strengthening and therefore exaggerating the look of cellulite. So that's one of the things I would look at, whether it is actually fat or the appearance of fat. Because if your collagen starts to tighten up, then the cellulite look can look worse. And then when you go through a little bit longer on this way of eating, that starts to, as you said, Anthony, it starts to actually just improve. So it could be just at the moment a little bit of aesthetics. And I think Richard might have been chiming in there with the fat calipers, or actually determine whether it is extra fat or whether it's just looking like extra fat.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go down the caliper route, but the caliper is one of the best ways to test to see if you are actually gaining fat. But reading that, I mean, there's not an awful lot of information to go on there. But you know, training 5 times a week, I'd question how long you're training for. Are you training less than an hour? Anything beyond an hour is going to increase cortisol. That's going to lead to weight gain. If you're not eating enough, so if you're fasting and only eating 1 meal a day, this can also be a contributing factor. Whether we're carnivore or live in a ketogenic diet, it can lead to an increased loss of water, leading to a loss of sodium. And when sodium levels in the body become too low, the brain will send signals to the adrenal glands to increase levels of specific hormones that regulate fuel balance. And cortisol is one of those hormones. That's going to lead to further weight gain. So excessive fasting, not eating enough, you know, only eating 1 meal a day, over exercise, all of these can be contributing factors. Drinking coffee, which I know is a big bugbear of Anthony's, and to which Anthony will be glad to hear that Stephen and I have both quit coffee, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But all of these factors can increase cortisol. Training is fantastic. Working out is fantastic. We shouldn't be working out beyond an hour because of these elevated levels of cortisol, which can lead to wasted muscle also. So, you know, eat as nature intended. But if you get a chance, come back with some of those answers. You know, let us know if you are fasting prolonged, you know, only eating 1 meal a day. I believe, you know, and I know this is counterintuitive to what, you know, the amazing Dr. Kiltz just said in regards to fasting. I am a big believer that women function better on eating more regularly. Men seem to thrive better on fasting and 1 meal a day. I find women tend to do better on 2 to 3 meals a day. I don't know how you guys find that, but you know, it's and it is different for everyone. But the trend, you know, for me with my clients seems to be that women thrive better on 2 to 3 meals a day over prolonged periods of fasting. And overtraining, we don't want to be overtraining. Omega-3s, as Anthony just said, beef and lamb. Lamb contains 10 times more omega-3s than beef does. We don't have to eat fish for omega-3s. We can get plenty from lamb. The omega-3s in lamb will help with anti-inflammatory processes, help with hormonal function, along with the saturated fats, so on and so forth. I don't want to steal too much of the airtime because I know you guys are paying for these questions for Anthony's time, but I think it's overtraining, prolonged fasting, and probably not even eating enough. But we need a little bit more information, I think.
Well, especially when you're fasting and you're getting a worsening of problems, that probably is the demonstration that you're probably not eating enough as opposed to eating too much. Your body auto regulates how much you're going to eat. It becomes very hard to eat past where your body wants. It tastes bad. It starts making you feel bad, and you just, everything in your body is telling you don't do this. And so if you don't go past that, don't do that. But if you're not getting to that point, you might be under eating. And your body is saying, okay, we're in a famine. We gotta hold things back. And then you fast, and then it knows you're in a famine. And then it really sort of ramps this up. And then other, and then cortisol is a great point. And sleep is another big one. If you're not getting proper sleep, you're gonna screw with your cortisol, and you're gonna have higher cortisol. That's something that our friend Dr. Tony Hampton has said in some of his talks, is that after if you average about 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night for 7 nights in a row, you actually give yourself pre-diabetes with the amount of cortisol that you jump up. But sleeping an average of 7 to 8 hours a night for another 7 nights will reverse that. So sleep is a very powerful tool in your health. And so it's a very important factor in your health. And so, don't neglect that as well. And so, food is extremely important, but these other factors are extremely important as well. And so don't neglect those.
Yeah, I think the overtraining is one we see week in, week out on our lives on a Sunday night. People just think more is more, but it isn't. Sometimes less is more. And it really is that simple. You can overtrain, overstress. Try and think of your body having like a stressometer. Then you got some good stress, and then just imagine like when you're looking at the revs on a car and it goes into the red area. You're doing that. You're just pushing yourself too much. Yeah, you may be going faster for a bit, but you're actually putting too much wear and tear on your engine to recover, and that's that knits in nicely with the sleep as well. So right, okay. Isabel, who's a school member, which is our community, Richard. Only 8 weeks into carnivore. And I'm struggling with sciatica for the past 4 weeks. Never had it before. Could this be something to do with oxalates or just coincidence?
I mean, it could be all of the above. Oxalates are something that I would consider them more of a diagnosis of exclusion a lot of the time, because they can sort of express anywhere in any tissue, and so you get all sorts of symptoms from it. But that wouldn't be my first guess, especially for this. But so if you sort of eliminate out everything else, you keep oxalates in the back of your mind, like, okay, well, everything else that hasn't worked, so maybe let's try adding in some very low oxalate tea or whatever, as per Sally Norton suggests, about 50 milligrams of oxalates or something like that. And does that suppress your symptoms? Does that make them go away? If it does, then it's like, okay, maybe it is oxalate dumping or something like that. And if it's not, then it's probably not. And so, but that wouldn't be my first thing that I would jump to. It could very well be a coincidence. A lot of things happen coincidentally, and we start a very new diet, and then all of a sudden we're looking at different changes, and we're saying, oh, okay, this is because of the diet. And that's a very reasonable question to ask, but it's not always, the answer is not always yes. And so there are other reasons for sciatica. There are very normal, boring reasons for sciatica, pinched nerves, and so if you're having problems with sciatica, go to your doctor and talk to them and find out, have them do a physical exam and see if there's something that is going on, and maybe they say, actually, that's not sciatica, that's something else. And so that's something that I think you should do. I mean, this can pop up at any time. You have some sort of disc herniation and radiculopathy going down a specific distribution of your dermatome. that happens, and that's not going to be because of your diet. In fact, a lot of times people that have sciatica, that have radiculopathy, improve. They reduce the inflammation, they reduce their symptoms, they reduce the expression of pain that's propagating up that nerve. And so, I don't think it's anything to do with your diet, possibly oxalate dumping, but I think you leave that for last, but keep that in the back of your mind. And if you don't find any good reason for you to have these symptoms, then you give that a try and see how it goes. But I would at least talk to your doctor to see if this actually is sciatica, and if so, do they have any idea of where it's coming from? Do you need an MRI, for example? Those are the first things that you do, and rule those things out first before you start looking for the very weird expressions of sciatica.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And as Anthony said, I mean, it could be related, it might not be. If it is an oxalate issue, you can remedy this with potassium citrate. I know Sally K is a big fan of calcium. I'm not. Quite the opposite, in fact. The issue when we gravitate into this lifestyle is we consume more sodium, which depletes potassium. Oxalate dumping is a known cause of hypokalemia, which is a state of low potassium. And then we put in calcium, which depletes magnesium, which has another impact on potassium. The key to this isn't the calcium, it's putting in potassium, putting in the thing that's caused the issue in the first place. Potassium citrate has a high affinity to oxalate. Taking a quality electrolyte, for example, or potassium citrate may alleviate it. Again, I don't think it is that, though. I'm not convinced that it is sciatica either. I wonder if it's Anthony's best friend, coffee. There's a lot of detoxing going on as well, with other mechanisms in the body. So it could be a number of things. But coffee has been, it's been an amazing tool for me all the way through my journey. It's a known ergogenic aid. It's a fat mobilizer. It works synergistically with, MCTs and ketones and so on and so forth. And you and I, Anthony, have spoken about this many times. You don't drink coffee at all because it gives you this instant reaction, leg pain. But it's never caused that with me. Yeah. So but recently, I've overconsumed coffee. So I've gone from, I only drink, and I say only 4 to 5 cups per day, but each cup was containing 2 double shots, which is the equivalent of 20 cups per day. The problem with coffee is the acrylamide content. Acrylamide is accumulative. It's a known carcinogen. I think in California in 2018, he was hit with a Prop 65 label, which means it's deemed to be extremely hazardous. It's a known carcinogen. Not also found in coffee, found in also other things also, but it's even found in mycotoxin-free coffee. And I had symptoms which were similar to Stephen's symptoms, which I believe were neuromuscular in regards to the effect of the acrylamide. And acrylamide is known to cause ALS, motor neurons disease. I had pain in my leg, I had tingling, where the nerves were constantly firing. It affected my gait. I couldn't walk properly. I couldn't lift my leg high enough to go upstairs. And all of this happened recently because of this constant accumulation of acrylamide. And I remember Anthony's voice in the back of my head, you've got to drop the coffee. So I did. I just switched. And this is something that I've been addicted to, for many years. And I'm not scared to say that. I was addicted to the caffeine. I love coffee, but because it was affecting my health, and as Jonathan Carnivore Muscle said earlier, live with the pain or take out the compound, make a change. I made the change 4 weeks ago on Friday. Within 2 weeks, all of these things have cleared up.
Nice.
So I don't know if this is Isabel's problem, but what happens is when we begin to live a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle, we start drinking more coffee because we start to focus on the things that we're not drinking soft drinks and other crap that we were prior. So we start to drink more of the things that we can drink, or we think that we can drink. Within the ketogenic community, there was a big push years ago for fat coffees, MCT coffees with butter, and so on and so forth. And this whole I don't want to call it a cult, but I mean, it's this whole thing of just drinking more coffee in general took over. And that's what I was doing. And this is what happened to me. I began drinking coffee with every meal. Instead of drinking alcohol, I quit alcohol and I drink a cup of coffee. And at the time, that was a fantastic segue. It allowed me to pull away from all of these other toxic compounds. And it worked for so long. But coffee isn't your friend. A line I've used numerous amounts of times with turmeric. Turmeric is not your friend. Coffee is not your friend. So I just bounced that back to Isabel. If it is an oxalate issue, then potassium citrate, or any citrate for that matter, but potassium in particular to remedy the hypokalemia, and maybe look at coffee. And consistency. Consistency is key, isn't it? Persevere.
Can I just throw a curveball in for you? Because over a decade in rehab, looking at lower backs, it could be a postural change as well. So one of the things is your spine is aligned, and if you think of a pregnant woman, why do you get an extra bit of weight the other side? Well, that's to keep your center of gravity correct. So you get a belly here, but you get a little bit of a saddlebag there, and your spine stays straight. So the human body is amazing. Well, if you're like that, looking at your spine, and maybe you've got a bit of a belly, and you start to lose that bit of a belly, or you lose body fat and you gain muscle, you get a slight postural shift to back actually where you should be. So your body has adapted your injuries that you're causing your body, basically getting over fat or under muscled or whatever. And when you get that postural shift and it all starts to go back, you can feel like you have sciatic pain. And the sciatic nerve is a huge nerve. So when you do a cadaver study, the body can be picked up using the sciatic nerve. It's that thick. It's like a telephone cable. And it is very prone to any sort of localized inflammation. So when you change your postural stance, you could just feel a little bit of what we call sciatic pain, but really it's just that there's inflammation pinching on the nerve somewhere along that region. You get that classic down through your thigh, through your shin, and then onto your foot, which is just basically tracing the nerve. So it could be that as well. So all the time we talk about this thing of health, when we think about diet, because it's like the carnivore thing we're doing, or keto or whatever, there are sometimes external factors, other factors that are involved, and it's just that our diet has sort of released them, liberated them. So it could be just a postural shift. Anyway, right. That's my 2 pence. Sorry about that, but I thought I'd add it because I think it's
you're not wrong though. I mean, there was an interesting case. Bill Knott up in Alaska. He was on with Kerry Mann. He was quite overweight. He was stuck in his house. He wasn't able to really move. He could just go from his bed to the toilet and sort of once a day, and that was it. And he was just sort of stuck where he was sitting and laying for years and years and years. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. And he started going on carnivore, and it's just okay, I'm just gonna give this a try. And he started losing heaps of weight. And then he started having some symptoms. I remember actually one of the first things I saw, I just sort of was watching some of his a video of his, and he was like an update sort of. He did a lot of updates. Every couple of days he'd sort of do an update, and which was great. People could follow along with his journey and see the things happening in real time. And he was talking about how he was I forget the exact things, but he had numbness down his legs and like around his groin, and it was basically like cauda equina sort of symptoms that you could potentially have big disc or something like that pressing on these nerves lower down in the lumbar spine that can be very serious. It's like an emergency. And so he had these symptoms that were very concerning for a very serious neurological condition that would require surgery. And so I reached out through Kerry, and I just said, look, I think he really needs to get this checked out properly. And it could be nothing, but the symptoms that he's describing are very concerning and alarming. For there's some definite red flag signs there, and I think he needs to get checked out. And so he did. And it was a big process because he was actually too big to fit in the MRI machine, and he tried to, and they had to go through a lot of, there was a lot of rigmarole and issues, but it ended up turning out that it was okay. And so they couldn't really figure out why he was having these neurological symptoms that did seem that lined up, that would have lined up perfectly with some sort of lesions, compressing his cauda equina, but he didn't have it, which is great. So he didn't have anything on that MRI anyway of his lumbar spine, that would explain his symptoms. And so one other person reached out, and it was another person who had been around the size of Bill, around like 700 pounds, 800 pounds, and had lost a bunch of weight. And he was saying that was because of how all of a sudden he lost all this weight. Now he could hold himself differently and actually put more compression on the external nerves, and that caused those symptoms in him, and the way he sort of changed how he was sitting and standing, these sorts of things, I believe ended up helping him with his symptoms. So I think it's certainly something to keep in mind.
Cool. Thank you. Right. Let's go on to the next question. This is an interesting one from Zing. Can you have increased depression, anxiety while in the adaptation phase? Currently on day 48 and feeling super low and having symptoms of anxiety.
Usually not. Usually people find that they feel better. There could be another reason why. 48 days in is fairly good. Some people, if they're withdrawing off different sorts of things, absolutely increase their depression, anxiety, and have different sorts of issues. But, after 48 days, that stuff should be well and truly out of your system. I would wonder, are you eating anything else, and what else is in your system? Are you, are you including anything else, artificial sweeteners or, vegetables or whatever? Or are you strict meat and water? And what meat and water are you having? Is it very high fat? Are you getting constipated, or do you have normal soft stools? Do you have, is it, what all these other things are going on? That's not typical. It is more typical that people with depression and anxiety, when they get all the stuff out of their system and they go into a ketogenic state and their body and brain start working better, that their depression and anxiety improve. Especially after several weeks and certainly after a couple months, you would expect that to get better. So I would sort of want to dip into what exactly you're eating and doing, and are you eating enough? Are you eating enough fat? Is there anything else that's sort of in your diet that maybe shouldn't be there? If there's anything besides just strict meat, fatty meat and water, and you're trying to aim between 1 and 2 grams of fat per 1 gram of protein. If you're doing anything outside of that, I would go to that first and foremost. Do all the other sorts of things. Make sure you're getting proper sleep, proper hydration, getting outside in the sun, and being out in natural environments and things like that. Improve your life in other ways. There could be other sorts of issues going on in just your personal life that could be affecting this as well, that don't necessarily have anything to do with your diet. But those are some of the first things to think about. Because you're right. That's not typical. That's not something that we would see, not something that you would typically see. Most of the time people are improving that. But so I would want to see if there's anything else that's influencing this, and go from there.
Richard?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, nothing to add.
Okay. I'll go on to the super chat. This isn't very carnivore related, but they've been kind enough to donate. So hi all, Dr. Chaffee. Could you give us a quick rundown of the teams you played for and the position, etc.?
Okay. So I started out in Seattle. So I played for, just the high school age team. It wasn't like a team at my high school, but it's sort of a club team, high school age. And that was the Redmond Rugby Club here. And we were actually nationally ranked as a high school team. So we would get, when we actually played, it wasn't just ranked. I mean, we ranked ourselves, second, third in the nation, pretty much every year in the national term championships. So it was a great place to start. There were a lot of great players, and they had fantastic coaching there for years that had then, moved on and been, professional coaches around the world after that. National team level coaches, professional coaches in Europe and things like that. So we just got very lucky that they lived in Seattle at the time and at the early part of their coaching career, and we got the full benefit of that. And, in fact, that main coach, Tony Smeeth, he started the All-American program in America for rugby and the U19 national team. And so he was an excellent coach. He'd been involved with USA Rugby for a long time. Now he's a head coach at Trinity College in Dublin. And so he's been there and BlackRock. BlackRock's like the top rated, or has been the top rated, school team in Europe for years, like decades. some of the best Irish players like went through there, like Brian O'Driscoll, was coached by Tony Smith as a 13, 14-year-old, winning European championships and things like that. So, got very lucky with that, and then played for the men's team. I was 17 when I started playing rugby, but I had a lot of sports background. So I wrestled since I was a kid, and I trained in MMA since I was 14. And again, just got very lucky. One of the top MMA gyms in the world and top trainers in the world, Matt Hume, top fighters in the world, Matt Hume, were just a few miles from my house. And so like if I'd finished with school, I'd pass out on the couch for a couple hours at 4:00. I'd run down or cycle down to this, to AMC kickboxing, which was in Kirkland. And I'd be there from 4:30 to 10 every single day. And I just trained there for years. And then, so I went into rugby. I was, at the AMC, there were some of the top pros in the world there. Josh Barnett, he's a Hall of Fame MMA fighter. He was my sparring partner when I was a teenager, and he was in his early 20s and fighting amateur and getting ready to go pro. And so a lot of top professionals that were there. Mighty Mouse that trains there now, so he's been training with Matt Hume forever. He's one of the best MMA fighters in the world, and a lot of others. And so had that sort of, I saw what it was like to train as a professional athlete. And I was training with these professional athletes, and so when I started playing rugby, I just put that right into that. And not everybody knows this, but a rugby tackle, the exact form is a double leg takedown. And so so I had that wrestling background, that fighting background. It's just a double leg takedown at pace. And the great thing was at the time was that you could actually pick people up and slam them back then. It was awesome. I absolutely loved it. So you're just running in, boom, you catch them, double leg, bam, and just smash them into the ground. Oh, I loved it. It was so much fun. I was actually playing when that transition. You weren't allowed to do that anymore. That was like my favorite thing to do. And, but, then I started playing, men's, and with Seattle, which again, Tony helped coach and bring them up to, we're just nationally one of the top teams, and in Canada as well. We play in the Canadian Premiership. So I got a lot of exposure early on with Seattle, and they just became like family. I mean, they're still like family, that's transitioned now into the Seattle Seawolves, which is the MLR Major League Rugby team, who actually won the first two championships of the MLR. That's here in Seattle. All my friends are the ones, coaching it, running it, and, general managers and all these sorts of things. Those are all the people that I grew up playing with. And so, my formative years were all with Seattle. And then in my second year, I earned a spot on the All-American team, on the All-American Junior National team, toured down to New Zealand, came back, was playing with Seattle, and ended up, deciding to go to University of Washington because I was, just young when I started, and that was the school that was here, and it's a very good school. And then my best friend wanted to go down to Arizona, or his family actually wanted him to go down to Arizona, so I went down with him. Absolutely hated it, hated the rugby coaches, hated the playing down there. And I was just like, I was so passionate about rugby. I was just like, if I'm not happy playing rugby here, I don't want to be here. And so I transferred back up to University of Washington, was playing up there, back with Seattle. And then after that, I decided just to say, I want to try this over in England. And, had some connections over there. They set me up with some people, and I went over there and I just tried out. And the team they set me up with, it was a bit weird situation, but I didn't end up staying there. And so I just started just calling some of the teams in the championship league, and just saying, hey, this is who I am. This is where I played. I played at, all the different, I was All-American. I, played in the, collegiate all-stars and men's all-stars, which was called the ITTs back then, before the NA4. And so I played at all those levels for 7s and 15s at collegiate and men's levels. And, so say, this is who I am, this is where I played, want to try out. And so, a couple of teams said, yep, sure, you can try out. I made both teams, and decided to play at Newbury, and for better or worse. And, but the other one was Nottingham. I actually looking back, I probably would have preferred going to Nottingham, but it doesn't matter. I ended up going to Newbury. I was there for a season, and ended up going back to Seattle and was playing there, and then went down to Ombak in San Diego, and was playing there in the Super League. And that was well, leading up to that, like in 2003, I was up for the, I was playing and, it was at the, playing all the all-star games and sort of 22, 23, no, it was 22 and 21, 22. And so I was playing in all the all-star games and, we were, top in our league in the US and Canada. And so I was invited to, try out for a spot on the 2003 World Cup team. And then in the finals in Canada, I took a ball and I was running. This guy like literally shoestring tackled me, just had me by the foot, just sort of tripped me up, and I was like on the ground. And so he's hanging onto my leg. So I was like, all right, post the ball back. And then sort of ruck's coming in. I'm sort of tied down there, and he just was on my foot and just did this like alligator death roll and just snapped my leg and just snapped my ankle, little prick. And I was playing against Langley actually up in Canada. I find that guy, it's going to be a problem. And, but I actually have no idea who it was, but, one of them did. And so I remember like at the time I was just like, when you get like a big injury like that, your body, you don't feel it, your body just gets flooded with adrenaline, endorphins, and you just get hyper focused. You just go, something's wrong. And you don't know what it is because you actually can't feel it. And so I was just like, I think something in my ankle, I think something's wrong there. And I was just like, sort of stood up and tried to put my weight on. I could actually feel my foot sort of slipping away from my leg. And I was like, "Oop, that's probably can't run on that." And like our fullback at the time, Ryan Bishop, just sees me. It was like, it's 10 minutes left in this game and we're down by 1. It's the championships. And we're in the Canadian leagues, and they hated us. They hated that we were in that league. And so there's a lot of those. Yeah, it was back in the day where there's a lot less regulated and control, and so there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of dirty play, and people stomping on heads and joints and assaults and things like that. So you had to really you had to be able to protect yourself, which was the fighting background came in good stead in that at that stage. But and so he's there just yelling. He's like, "Chaffee, get in there!" I'm like, "Oh, all right, I guess I'm not going off." And so I like hobbled over to the side of the ruck, and I knew if I tried to actually plant in and hit somebody, my foot would just rip off. There's no way it would have been able to take any pressure. And so I just went down like on my hands and on my left leg, and I sort of curled up my right leg behind me to try to protect my foot and ankle, because I knew if that hit the ground, it would just rip off my leg. And so I was just there with just one post, and I just bam, just throw myself into someone, just throw them into their legs, and then just sort of like 3-post bear crawl over to the side, and then just do it again. Just like tackling. I had made like several more tackles, during that, and kept playing. But my buddy was like just like saying, "Hey, run this play with me." I'm like, I can't, I cannot run. Like seriously, my ankle's fucked. And he's like, "All right, well, just yell for it, and I'll skip it past you," and stuff like that. So he screamed that. People would buy scream loud. Oh, they like crashed in on me, skipped it out, made a break, and he starts going up, and we have this break going out, and he's just got like the fullback to beat, and throws a pass to try to beat him, and the guy picks it off and returns it for a try, and so that was it. And so, adding insult to injury, I broke my leg, and we lost the damn championship. So that was annoying. But because of that, I wasn't able to try out for that spot, and that really, really bummed me out. And so I was, I had put off, medical school because I wanted to, go for a spot on that. And then I was just like, okay, well, I've unfinished business to do. So I wanted to go and play and get back up. And, they say, with an injury like that, I didn't walk for 5 months after that. Actually, I had, an unstable fracture in my distal fibula. And then I just destroyed like the deltoid ligament and other sort of, parts of the ankle that were very important. So I had to get major reconstructive surgery to fix my ankle. So because your tib fib, you're sort of sitting there, and then your foot sort of cradled in between those two bones, and my foot was out here. It was completely dislocated and damaged. Yeah, exactly. So so you have you see all those rubber bands and things like that. Those are all the ligaments holding that in place. And so that should all just sit right there because of those ligaments. And my foot was here. Right. So all those ligaments were just destroyed. And, in medical school years later, they said, well, the deltoid ligament is so strong that you'll never be able to damage it or tear it. It would cause an avulsion fracture, just you rip a chunk of bone off where it's attached before the deltoid ligament itself was damaged. Well, I damaged it, so I don't know what to tell you, but I didn't see it, but I was told that it had really destroyed the deltoid ligament and it had to be reconstructed. And so I was like, okay, so that's not good. And so it took like 5 months to get over that, and I was just very, very, very depressed about that. So I was just determined to keep going and make it back, because they're saying, well, you don't recover from, you're not going to play, top level international sort of rugby again if you have an injury like that. And I was like, well, we'll see. And so I was just determined to get back, and I did. And so 2 years later, when I was 24, I was now in the running again for the national team. But I'd missed out on the 2003 World Cup. A lot of my friends that I'd played, and teammates that I played with in the All-American team in '98 were now playing. And I think Court Schubert was the captain. He actually played in Wales. He played for Cardiff for a while there, Court Schubert, and he was on the All-American tour with me, and down in New Zealand, and and he was the U.S. captain for a while, and I think he was at that time. And so I was just determined to get back. And then down in San Diego, I was playing there and the Super League, and had a stacked team. We had like 11 national team players in our team, and I was actually starting over for 2 of them, and playing in the back row for on back. So I played back row mostly. So 7 and 8 were my preferred positions. I always preferred 7, the open side flanker, because I could just really get into the mix defensively. And I had 2 different mindsets. If I was playing 8, I was more offensively oriented. If I was playing 7, then I was much more defensively oriented. And I just really preferred the defensive side, and I felt like make a much bigger impact defensively, because I was just making as many tackles as I possibly could, and just really just shutting down their offense. And so I was playing with on back, and I was trying to get back onto back into the running to get onto the camp to fight for a spot for the 2007 World Cup. And I ended up breaking my hand, not even in rugby, but we were out, and I caught 3 guys trying to steal my girlfriend at the time's purse, and so I had to beat them up, and I broke my hand in the process on their face. So that wasn't great, but it is what it is. And so I ended up having to get surgery on my hand. I actually had that was probably malpractice. The guy actually did the wrong surgery in the wrong way, and actually debilitated my hand intentionally, because he thought I was just going around, fighting people and just being a menace to society. And so he decided to cripple my hand to take me out of that. And I told him, I was like, look, I'm fighting for a spot on the World Cup team. I need my hand back. And so I needed a plate and all these sorts of things. And all my friends at orthopedic surgeons like, you need a plate. And as soon as that skin heals, then you're back on the field, so that can be a couple weeks and you're back on the field. He actually did pins instead of a plate. He refused to do a plate. I should have just told him to go F himself. But normally you do pins from the back so that it doesn't pin down the extensor sheath. And but he did it from the front, and he purposefully stuck down my extensor sheath, so I couldn't move my finger. I'm like, hey, I can't move my finger. What the hell's going on? Why can't I move? Oh, no, that's normal. That's okay. I'm like, it's not okay, but like, all right. And so like a month later, I was able to get the pins out, and I couldn't move that finger. It was just completely stuck like that. It took years before I was able to get it's not even full extension anymore, but it's 95% of the way there. And so I couldn't move it at all like that. So I had to tape it. I had to tape it to my middle finger just so I could use it, or to that. I couldn't move it otherwise on my own. So it crippled my hand, and it was a much, much, much longer recovery as a result of that. And when I was in medical school, I actually saw them doing that pins from the back. And I said, is that because you want to avoid the extensor sheath so you don't pin it? He's like, yeah, that's actually exactly why we do that. I was like, that motherfucker, like that piece of shit. He did that on purpose. And if I probably would have sued his ass if I'd known about it. But at that point, it was already too late. And well, I might have been able to do it at that point. But anyway, absolute piece of garbage. And if I remember who that is, he'll probably be, not wanting to see me again. But so that was that. And I wasn't able to fight for a spot on in 2007. I just said, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna focus on medical school now and just get on with life. And so when I was playing in England, I'd gone over and visited Tony over at Trinity and just loved it over there. It was like the economy was booming. It was before the market crash, the housing crash. Dublin was amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. Like the industry was just booming. It's just everybody was flooding there from all over Europe. It was so much fun, and the rugby was great, and the people were great. And so I just had in my head that that's where I wanted to go, and then play for Tony again, because he was hands down one of my favorite coaches ever. Still is. He's just a fantastic coach. And so I ended up going to the Royal College of Surgeons and playing for Trinity, and playing because the Royal College of Surgeons had a 4-year postgraduate program that was modeled on the U.S. version. And so that was instead of like a 5-year version out of high school, so it was just, it's just this, like our version instead of the different version. And so, I ended up doing that and playing for rugby for Trinity, which, played in the top All Ireland League 1, 1A actually. And so played with them and all through medical school. And then after medical school, I ended up, my intern year was in another part of Ireland in Cork. And so I played for Cork Constitution down there as one of the top teams in Ireland as well. Just sort of below premierships, sort of semi-pro level, which is, very good standard. There was a lot of great players that in those teams. And, when you're working 120 hours a week, you don't really have time to do anything else. And then after that, I was back in America and went carnivore again, felt amazing, and went back out and started playing with Seattle again. So that's sort of my then when I went down to Australia, I played with one of the Western Australian Premiership teams, Cottesloe, and that was great too. And I felt like a superhero. I was 39, and just felt amazing. Was jacked, just absolutely shredded. And felt great. But then my knee started swelling up, started getting effusions in my knee, and couldn't figure out why the hell they were doing that, since I had damage to my kneecaps from kickboxing, and damaged that cartilage, and so the little bits of cartilage flake off and things like that. The rest of the knee's pristine, but you get this buildup of junk from the breakdown on the arthritis on my kneecap, and all of a sudden it just swell up, and it's a real pain in the ass. And so I wasn't able to keep playing, and then work just took over, and you were just doing ungodly hours and just inhumane hours, and you can't really do that anymore. So it's that was the last time I played, was with that. But as soon as I figure out how the hell to get my knee to stop swelling when I run, I'll be back out there for sure, back in the back row that night.
Yeah. So nice short answer there. They got their money's worth, didn't they, for that one? That was brilliant.
I think.
All right. I know we're coming to the end of your hours. Just quickly, we've got Rachel. I can see you, Dr. Rachel Brown, in the background. This is one of the super chat questions. Doc, you said in the clip that you eat 2 pounds of steak a day. Is that enough for you? What is your weight and your height, if you don't mind telling, so I can get a perspective? I'm a 31-year-old male, a 190-pound male, and eat more as a new carnivore.
Yeah. Well, it also depends on, how much nutrients your body needs. Your body chases nutrients. It doesn't chase calories, right? So, if you're coming from a place where your body, needs more of this stuff, then you need more of it. If you're working out a lot and you're putting on muscle, your body's going to want more of that. If I'm sedentary and I'm just going to the hospital and coming back, then that's about what I eat, like 2.5 pounds of meat a day, usually in just one sitting. But it can vary. I mean, I don't weigh things out every day. That's just a guess. But I think that's a fairly accurate guess. But when I'm working out, then that will double easily. And so I'm working out regularly. If I back when I was playing rugby and lifting weights regularly and things like that, and my body wanted to put on muscle and bulk, easily eating double that, 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds, 5 pounds, something like that. I mean, easily eating that. And so, it just depends. It depends on what you're doing. So when I'm just when I'm just sitting around and just sedentary, then yeah, it would be around 2.5 pounds, something like that. I'm 6'3". My weight varies, but like right now, I think I'm around 220, 225, which is actually really light for me. Normally, when I'm lifting weights, normally I stick around 230, but I've been traveling a lot, haven't been actually eating as much as I normally would, and haven't been working out in a while. So, you just trim down a bit. Normally when I'm lifting weights regularly, if I can stay in the gym at least, 3-4 days a week, I'd typically be around 240. And if I'm able to eat enough. And so, but yeah, is that enough? Seems to be, I just eat until it stops tasting good anyway. And that's what it seems to end up being for me.